ComC is happy to offer their new discounted consignment service, ComC Fresh Pulls. Effective immediately, ComC is offering 50% off processing fees for all newly released trading card consignments. To qualify, cards must be received within 90 days of the hobby release date and submitted using the Elite, Select, or Mailbox processing service level. ComC is happy to announce their December auction event. For the whole month of December, ComC is now offering auctions on all cards with no minimum auction fee. Submit your items today. To stay up to date with ComC and all their newest promotions, follow ComC on all social media at checkoutmycards, one word, on all platforms. You're listening to the WaxPackHero Sports Card Minute, a podcast where we discuss both the hobby and business sides of collecting. I'm your host, Mike Summer, and I want to help you buy, sell, and trade your way into a collection you'll love. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the WaxPackHero Sports Card Minute. We're here in December, the beginning of December. We're on the home stretch of 2021. It's the holiday season. I am in a good mood. We've got the house decorated. The girls are doing their sports seasons, which is fun to go watch them play and compete. And the shop is in full Christmas season. We've got people coming in and doing some Christmas shopping and having a lot of fun doing that kind of stuff, having some good conversations with people coming in, seeing some interesting things come in the door. So a lot of good things happening right now. And I am also super excited about today's conversation and the podcast that I get to bring you today. I have an interview with David Peck, one of the premier wrestling card collectors in the hobby. And we have a great conversation about his background in collecting wrestling cards, what he's looking for, what motivates him to have one of the very best wrestling card collections out there. And so I hope you enjoy hearing this conversation with David. First, I'm going to tell you about Underdog Collectibles, the online shop run by collectors for collectors. They break new product every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday night. You can find out what they're breaking at udogcollect.com. You can also join their Facebook group, subscribe on their YouTube page if you want to watch that. And you can also check out their physical brick and mortar shop in Knoxville, Tennessee. Check out udogcollect.com and tell them WaxPackHero sent you. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
No problem. You are probably regarded as having one of the top wrestling card collections of anybody out there. And so I thought it would be great to bring you on and talk a little bit about wrestling and wrestling cards. From time to time, I've had a few other wrestling collectors come on. Zan Morning has been on with me and talking wrestling. And I know you've been a part of his show and have been on his show, I believe, in the past. And so maybe let's just start, for those that may not know you, introduce yourself and talk a little bit about how you started getting into cards and wrestling cards.
Well, I started collecting baseball cards in 1985. And so I collected into my early 20s. I'm 42. And then took a couple years off. I was just getting my career going. And then, I sort of dabbled in some graded cards, the Roger Clemens, Ken Griffey Jr.'s, and, just kind of fooled with that a little bit for a couple years. I would check eBay from time to time just to kind of keep up with baseball cards. And, but I just really wasn't active. I mean, quite frankly, I was more interested in trying to trade in the stock market and, pay for my wife's wedding ring and, just sort of different stuff. And so anyway, I got killed in the market in 08 and 09 trading options. And it was really a bittersweet situation. And so I just was like, gosh, I'm so tired of just lighting money on fire, and so I was like, Brock Lesnar was he was in the UFC, but it was UFC 100. So it was like a big deal. And I said, let me get on eBay and see. I remember Brock had tried out for football. Let me see if he's got some football cards. I kind of felt like he did. And so I bought some Brock football cards. I bought that Topps had this patch like UFC thing. And, it's funny. It's finally back to what I paid for it. I bought two of them for $50 a piece. Bought some, Brock wrestling cards. And then, I said, geez, Hulk Hogan had an 85 Topps card when I was a kid. Let me just kind of see what that goes for. And I stumbled on a listing for the 82 Series A. Well, let me just say that a little better. 1982 Wrestling All-Stars, Series A and Series B. And the guy, there was two graded cards. There was a Hogan and a Jerry Lawler, both PSA 9. And then the 82B had Iron Sheik, BGS 9.5, Slaughter 9, and Tito Santana 9. And so the guy wanted $400 and $359. And, at the time I thought, geez, that's more than I'm like really comfortable spending. So I watched the auction for a week. It didn't sell. And he started it back over at $199 and $159. And I put in a bid, and I woke up the next day, and next thing you know, I was the winner. So I get the cards in the mail, and I open up the box, and the guy was nice enough. He sent me some of his duplicates. And all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, Andre the Giant has a card. Ric Flair has a card. Kerry Von Erich has a card. I was like, these are awesome. And so I just started loading the boat, and I started buying and buying and buying. And so then as we got into 2010, I had purchased a really nice sealed 1982 A set. And, initially I planned to keep it sealed, but as the day wore on, I got home, I started looking at them, and I was like, I got to open these. So when I opened them, there were some absolutely pristine cards. And so I signed up for PSA, and I sent in 15 that I thought were the best. And, it's pretty cool. In that 15 card submission, and then my next submission, 5 of the 68 PSA 10s from that set came from that sealed set. So
wow.
Then at that time, I decided I was going to put together the best wrestling all-stars collection. And, I just kind of went crazy with it.
Had you been a wrestling fan consistently growing up? Was that something that was, you talked about getting baseball cards early on, but were you watching wrestling, and did you buy any of those 80s Topps cards when you were collecting as a kid?
Yeah, so I've been watching wrestling since I was in diapers. A lot of people, in the 80s, obviously wrestling became popular, but here in Florida, wrestling was huge in the 70s. So championship wrestling from Florida was the territory that covered Florida. Well, it was arguably in the 70s the top territory in the NWA. As you got into the 80s, Mid-Atlantic was probably, arguably the best. But so my dad went to a lot of the matches at the Eddie Graham Sports Stadium here in Orlando. So, right out of the womb, we were watching wrestling because he was watching wrestling. So probably 1984 is my first recollection of actually the shows. So when I'll watch them back on YouTube, I say, okay, I remember that. So I was huge Hulkamaniac. I mean, just loved Hogan. I've kept up with wrestling the whole time. I'm not as big a fan of current wrestling as I am of the old wrestling, but I did buy a few packs in 1985 of the Topps cards. My parents, I have 3 brothers, so there's 4 boys. My dad was in construction. We were, blue collar family. So, money was not plentiful. So, baseball was king in 1985, and Dwight Gooden, chasing his cards was a big deal. So I bought a little bit, but very, very little. So it was just not, I basically, like I said, if I had $2 to spend on cards, it was going to baseball.
So that's how you treated that back then. But it seems like with wrestling being such an important part of your life and something that you are passionate about, once you finally made that connection as an adult with the cards from when you were a kid in the 80s, that just seemed like a natural fit. And so you talked about then
fit. And I think the thing that nostalgia, when you look at what drives collectors, I think nostalgia is near the top. One of the arguments that just drives me crazy that I try to stay out of them is, people say, well, somebody just wants to collect for the money. Well, that's their prerogative. I don't view there being like one right way to collect, but I think a lot of collectors, almost all collectors, nostalgia really drives it. And so being a big wrestling fan, and it connected me to the past. I mean, one of the nice things about the Wrestling All Stars is there was a lot of performers in there. It was a regional based set. So you had people all over the country, and in Florida, I wouldn't have seen most of these guys, or when they were there, I was, too young to know who they were. So it really was great because, like if you take the 83 set, there's a guy named Tiger Mask. I remember vividly when I opened the first pack of those, and they come in complete sets, but they're in cellophane, saying to myself, who's this guy Tiger Mask? Wow, he looks goofy. So I go on YouTube, and, much to my surprise, you could argue he's the greatest technical wrestler of all time. I mean, his matches versus the Dynamite Kid from Japan are just legendary. So, it was neat to just sort of connect with a lot of these vintage guys that I wasn't aware of. And of course, the ones I was.
You talked about also, setting out that goal for yourself to build one of the best.
No, the best.
The best set. Not one of, I'm sorry.
We were at the Wrestling All Stars. There's nobody even close. And that was by design.
And how was it? I guess where I was going with that question is, it sounds like your familiarity with grading really ramped up once you got that set, opened it up, and the cards looked so good. What was it that kind of flipped that switch for you to take it beyond just the nostalgia aspect of getting some cards of these guys that you grew up watching to wanting to get the best collection? So was there something in there that just kind of to flip for you that just said, I don't want to just collect these, I want to have the best collection?
Well, and that's a great question. And so, yes, there was. Basically, what had happened is I had been accumulating, quite a few of the cards for about 6 months. And when I decided to go with PSA as the brand I was going to put the cards behind, there was a guy in the 1959 Fleer Three Stooges. And I looked at his registry sets. I saw that he didn't just have one. He had he might even had 20. It was a lot. And so I said, this is what I'm going to pattern myself after. Not only am I going to, be in first place, but I'm going to try to accumulate a lot of them. And so, for 12 years in a row, my sets have been number one. So, basically, right from that time, I decided that's what I was going to do. And like the 82A, I've got 12 or 13 registered sets right now. So, it's and the top 10, 7 are mine. So I wanted to dominate, and it sounds, a little different, but that just was my goal. So that's what I tried to do.
Have you expanded onto other wrestling sets from that era? I know, you and I, it's probably been a year ago or so, we were interacting a little bit on Twitter. I was asking some questions about some of the different food issue sets. There's the Canadian Swanson set, there's the Carnation set, there's a few of these other kind of oddball food issue sets that can be pretty tough to find in good condition and in good grades. Have you expanded your focus of building that collection beyond the All-Stars there to some of these other kind of vintage wrestling products? Or are you still, for the most part, only focused on the Wrestling All-Star set?
Well, I have a lot of cards from various sets, right? And so, for example, let's take the 85 tops. I have the Hogan's in tens, and the O-Pee-Chee, I have those in tens, right? But I haven't built out the sets.
Okay.
Okay. So I have a lot of that stuff, but the Carnation set is one that we've discussed. And yeah, I've got the top set of those. And, I've been collecting those for, I guess 11 years, because it didn't really, that first little bit, I don't recall buying any. And some of that had to do with just availability. I mean, I think it's easy to forget that if you go back 12 plus years ago, the number of active listings for wrestling cards on eBay was around 3,000. I did a search a year or two ago and it was like 100,000.
Wow.
Okay. So you could, have said to yourself, all right, I'd like to collect these carnation cards, but at the time you might have had to wait 2 or 3 months to actually see them show up. And what had happened was there's a really, and it's a great resource for anybody listening, WrestlingTradingCards.com is, in my opinion, the best wrestling card resource on the internet. And so I had gone there to look at checklists. And so, that's how I familiarized myself with cards that I didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the carnation set, I've been actively collecting, like I said, for 11 years or so. And I've got 5 of the 6 cards in their top grade. Unfortunately, this was such a bummer. Probably like 4 years ago, the first Koloff's card pops up in a PSA 9. And there's an eBay seller, this guy named Roger, and he's got a lot of aspirational prices. He always has on his listings, so they kind of clog up the feed because there's so many at high prices. And he listed it at $4.99. Now, I think a lot of people, they look at listings today and they'll see $4.99 is a lot, but there's a gazillion wrestling cards now all of a sudden listed at $4.99 or higher.
Right.
Well, 3-4 years ago, I mean, that just was not the case. So I hit the buy it now. And I mean, like quickly. And I kind of think he thought, man, wow, I can't believe that this thing sold, right? And so I get it in the mail. I'm so pumped. Well, in the interim, I had a PSA 7, which at the time was the highest grade. Well, I sold that or traded it to a guy that I knew from the PSA message board, knowing that for my registry set, here I got the 9. I don't need this 7. It'll help recoup some of the cost.
Right.
I get the 9. I don't know if it happened in sealing. I don't know if it happened when it was mailed to me. It had a surface wrinkle that was very visible on the front. Now, if anybody's collected the carnation cards and graded them, if you look on the very top of the back, the biggest issue with grading those is most of them out of the pack have a slight wrinkle. And so you're looking at a 5 or a 6 maximum. I mean, if you've got a gem mint card, you might get a 6. Most of them will grade a 5. And so a wrinkle on the front is unusual. And this thing, I mean, it was a bad wrinkle. Like, you couldn't help but see it. So now I'm out my 7. I have to work with the seller. He works with PSA, because they had to take that out of the pop report. It wasn't a 9. So I'm stuck with a 6. So here we are 3 or 4 years later, and I'm still attempting to upgrade that card. But, I think the nice thing about wrestling cards is there's a lot of cool ones to choose from. I knew early on that the Wrestling All-Stars were going to be in a league of their own. It just, to me, it was obvious. And, I think when you actually, when you learn the story of those cards and how they were offered in magazines and programs, if you see the magazines and programs and you see that they use the stock photos for the cards, it's wrestling history. So, and on top of it, they're the first sort of pack-driven wrestling set in North America. Well, I shouldn't say that because the Parkhurst is North America, but in America. Mm-hmm. So they were going to be the set, but I just at the time wanted to get my hands on lots of different wrestling cards. And the Carnation set to me is, I think if it's not the second best set, it's easily in the top 5.
Yeah, it's fun. Zan turned me on to that when I'd had that conversation with him, and I was able to track down the full set. Mine is raw; it's not graded, but it was fun to put together. I love those oddball food issue type of things. You talked about your affinity for 80s era wrestling more than the current product that's out there. Are there any kind of modern cards that you go after, guys from the kind of the current era of wrestling?
No, I am very, very excited to see that there's so much enthusiasm right now around these regional sets, or like, for example, it might be 2018 or 19, like the All In set.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing, is it Joey Janela? I think's the guy's name. He released some sets from, maybe it was Pro Wrestling Gorilla. There's a bunch of them. And I think that's critical for growing the hobby. Just the thing for me is that I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the current product. I do think that guy MJF, the first one of these I ever did was with Eric from Beckett, and I think it's Fat Packs. Mm-hmm. And, he asked me about that, and we talked about AEW, and I think AEW is great for the industry. You need another billionaire competing, because wrestling's tough to make money. You need deep pockets. You need to be able to stay in the game. And at that time, I said, there's this guy MJF, and I'm like, this guy's awesome. He's got a great look. His promos are exceptional, and I love the fact that he stays in character. So, matter of fact, earlier today, I saw a PSA 9 of his card from the All Out or All In. I think it's All In. And it was at $350 with time to go. So I think it's great. It's just that I don't have a great connection to it. And I think the other thing that people have to do sometimes is sort of stay focused, right? You see too many people that they try to take their collection in so many different directions. Mm-hmm. and then they get bored, or they run out of money, or they need to sell something to pay for something else, etc. I never really want to find myself in that position. Now, the pretty much the newest, if you will, set I go to is 2002, and WWE Royal Rumble has an incredible lineup. It's got Brock Lesnar, John Cena, Bautista, Randy Orton, Stacy Keibler, a number of people from that time frame. So I collect those. But like I said, I think it's fantastic that you're seeing new product put out. It brings in new collectors, and I always encourage people to get in the game.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. As you were talking, another idea came to mind, and we've got AEW, and we've got Upper Deck now with the AEW license going to be releasing the first set of AEW cards here in the next few weeks. And then we have the WWE changing hands from Topps to Panini coming up later on, I guess, early next year. And it kind of got me thinking. You talked about not having as much connection to the current wrestling product that's out there. And I sometimes find myself wondering in cards if there are times where cool cards connect people to the sport that they're representing before the people themselves are connected to the sport. Like sometimes it's I watched wrestling growing up. That's what connects me and makes me want to have these cards. I think there's sometimes some collectors who love to collect cards and then discover a card and say, hey, this is really cool. Maybe I should start watching that sport, or, maybe I should start watching that event. I'm kind of wonder if we might see a little bit more of that as the AEW grows, and as we have, Panini taking over and releasing a fresh new batch of trading cards compared to what Topps has been doing. I don't know. Any perspective or thoughts on that?
I think that's a great observation. I mean, take soccer, for example. We've seen an absolute explosion in soccer trading cards, right? I could totally see somebody that sort of saw those cards moving and said, okay, I'm going to start dabbling in these. And then, wow, I'm going to watch soccer and I really like it. For me, I've watched a lot of wrestling, like, trust me, like on the, I watch it on YouTube frequently. I tune in a little bit to Monday Night Raw, a little bit to AEW. I mean, I think for me, the tough part is that I don't, I'm not a really huge fan of the way the matches have changed. It's not so much even the talking. It's like, I don't understand how you can have 13 false finishes in a match. The part of like developing a character is like they have a finishing move. Like the person shouldn't kick out like 9 times. When Hogan dropped the leg drop on you, Ultimate Warrior kicked out, and you knew that was like, oh, geez, what's about to happen, right? But everybody else, it was like, okay, Hogan's winning this match, right? And so that made him sort of larger than life. I mean, there's other factors. But when you have a match today that takes like 18 minutes and, they're legitimately using their finisher like time and time again, it doesn't appeal to me.
Are there any cards that are kind of on your grail list that you've not been able to track down yet that you are still looking to actively pursue? Or maybe you don't want to share that because everyone knows what kind of collection you have and might try to take advantage of that. But if you are able to share, is there anything that's kind of, I want one of these and I've not been able to get one yet?
Well, there is, but I'm going to, it's funny you mentioned that because I started to, so I'm active on Twitter, and I think a lot of what basically for 12 years, I was all over the PSA message boards, Blowout, Net 54. And I transitioned to Twitter because I thought, it's real time. You get to connect with so many different people. There's no moderator. You're your own moderator. And to me, it just seemed like where the industry was going. I mean, to me, message boards are yesterday's news, quite frankly. And so a couple of days ago, I was like, I should put this out there that I'm looking for this. And then I was like, oh no, I should not, because then all of a sudden, if somebody has it, they're going to hold me hostage. But what will happen is somebody else will go buy it, because if I don't have it, they'll now they have it. And we're in such a different time frame for wrestling cards. I mean, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, people would just, sellers, they'd go to the PSA registry and they'd say, oh, well, DPEC 100 doesn't have this card, so the price is much higher. There's a guy on Twitter named Joey Graben, and he has the number 2 1983 set. And I mean, he's like literally like right behind me. I mean, it's like half a card grade or something different, right? And so, we've played games with each other. There's only 3 1983 Wrestling All-Stars Hacksaw Dugan PSA 10s. Well, he has all 3. And he, he's playing keep away. So I'm going to keep this to myself. It's actually not a Grail card. I mean, nobody would guess it, right?
Sure.
It's not anything that's probably worth a fortune. It's eluded me, and it's something I'd like to get. And if somehow I track it down, I'll tell you what it is.
There you go. Well, that actually brings up, another question is, maybe a way to approach that is having a group or a small group of people that you are working with behind the scenes, friends or whatever it is that and can trust behind the scenes to keep an eye out for you for some of those cards. I've wondered, because I've heard the same thing happen with some other super collectors out there in other sports too, right? As somebody finds out that a card's available that guy doesn't have, and they, like you said, hold it hostage. I've kind of wondered if there can be a network of connections or friends that you have that can kind of keep an eye out for some of those key cards, so that it's not quite as readily apparent that you're the one that's after it. I wonder if that might be something that would work.
Well, it probably would. I mean, I think the PSA registry, you sort of show your hand, right? Mm-hmm. Like it exposes you if you have them registered, right? But so, I'm very, very close with Rob England, his wrestling card collector. I'm happy. It took about a year for me to get him to get on Twitter. And so Rob Rob has a stellar collection. And I mean, he's got stuff going back to like the late 1800s. I mean, if somebody looked at who has probably the most diverse graded collection, I'd say it's Rob. If somebody just looks at pure monetary, it's me. And so that said, Rob and I, look out for each other to some degree, right? But because for example, he collects a lot of the signed wrestling all-stars, and I have a bunch, but I wasn't like trying to piece together the set. So probably maybe a year ago, there was a Ray Stevens that popped up on eBay, and I quickly text him. And, so instead of buying it and selling it to him for 5 times as much, right. I let him buy it. Right. So it could work for sure. I think the reality of it is that we're in such a weird time where there's so much speculation in trading cards in general. This wasn't the case, some years back. I mean, There was a little bit, but now you have a lot of speculation. So I think that the profit motive has really moved into the hobby. Not that it wasn't there before, but if you look at wrestling cards, they sort of exploded in 2010 and 11 and then dropped in half. And then they went up again for a couple of years in some cases, but not just a couple of the key cards, right? Mm-hmm. But in the last, I credit Gary Vaynerchuk. Yep. One of the probably smartest things I've done in my life was when I started seeing Gary V posting trading, wrestling trading cards on Twitter. I would respond to his comments with pictures of some of mine. Yep. Well, he'd start blowing up my private messages. And one day I said, you know what? I'm going to sell him one of my Hogans, because if he puts an 82 Hogan on Twitter, this thing's going to go, up. I didn't know it'd go up as much, but I mean, that'd be not fair to say, but I knew it would go up. So sure enough, I reached a fair price. I didn't try to gouge him because he's rich or anything. Not a day after he got the card, all of a sudden, here comes a video. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, that card's so cool. And that was it. That's when wrestling cards, they just started taking off. And, so, I mean, it was probably going to happen regardless, but I made a calculated bet to throw some chum in the water for a shark, and they bit, and, and it worked.
Well, I really appreciate you spending a few minutes today talking. And, if anybody out there wants to see some really cool cards, they need to go check out David's Twitter feed, because he's always posting shots of some of the coolest cards that you'll see. Why don't you take a minute to let everybody know where they can find you if they want to check out some of the collection that you share out there?
Sure. I go by DPEC 100, and that's, and the PSA registry, and then naturally morph that over to Twitter. So DPEC 100 at Twitter. And I used to have like a show and tell website on GoDaddy where I had the domain name of 1982 wrestlingallstars.com. So I'm on Instagram at 1982 Wrestling All Stars. And, basically the Instagram page is, obviously a personal page, a lot of it's cards and, some pics and stuff. But my Twitter page is basically just one big advertisement for wrestling cards. Yep. So the goal, honestly, is just to try to keep people engaged. And I always used to have the saying, I wanted to take wrestling cards to the next level. So, we've been working hard at it, and we still got some progress to go, but, we've made a lot of strides.
Well, thanks again for joining me today.
Very good. Thank you so much for having me.
The Sports Card Shop is your small-town local card shop with a global reach. Located in New Buffalo, Michigan, the shop is one of the most accessible in the Midwest. In addition to being an authorized Panini direct dealer, the Sports Card Shop carries all major trading card brands, including Topps, Upper Deck, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and more. With all that new wax, 500,000 singles, and showcases full of graded cards, you're sure to find something great for your collection, whether you're just starting out or a seasoned collector. The Sports Card Shop is your one-stop shop. So call us, come see us, or visit us on the web and social media. Our phone number is 269-469-0140. Website is thesportscardshop@moco.com. The Sports Card Shop is part of the Moco Retail Group, connecting sports, the hobby, and people around the world.
Well, David has a great collection and a lot of knowledge about one of my favorite eras of wrestling cards, and that is the 80s. And so whether it's the main sets or whether it's these food issue oddballs, he's a great resource. He's always willing to engage and interact and answer questions on Twitter. So I would recommend going out there and following him if you have any kind of interest in 80s wrestling cards at all. Thanks again to David for coming on the show. Thanks again to you for tuning in. Leave me a rating and review. Reach out to me on Twitter at @TheMikeSummer. Send me an email at WaxPackHero@gmail.com and let me know what you think of the show, what ideas you have on what could be better, and even some ideas on who you'd love to hear me have a conversation with. Well, that's all I've got for you today, so I'll catch you next time.